Last panel, I understand. So, appreciate your patience. What do we got? We got 4, so I'll sit here to keep the numbers up. Why don't I bring up Lisa Loud, of course, no introduction needed whatsoever, from Secret. Tony Evans from CETI, Tony. And Mark Rydon is either here or not, is certainly, but he's made it. Well done, Mark. Mark wins the award for the most, the fastest move across Toronto to get here on time. All right, so I'm Michael Casey. I am the chairman of DAIS, the Decentralized AI Society, and we can talk a little bit about what that is through the lens of what this conversation is going to be about. Some of you may know me from my time at CoinDesk. I was the chairman as part of that, my role there, of a little event called Consensus. So it's going to be fun this time being here to focus on this new thing of decentralized AI. And I think what we'll do is we'll just launch straight into it, and you guys can talk a little bit about your organizations. I think you probably don't need to do much because people know about Secret. But as we just discussed this point, now, I think where this panel has landed is really around compute, right? We've got 2 providers of decentralized compute here, and we've got Secret, which has done great work embedding, confidential computing technologies, TEEs, directly into the chip layer. And so we'll talk about this as a foundational capacity for everything else that we think needs to happen in the decentralized AI space, because without the privacy, we haven't got anything, and compute is the starting basis, the resource, the key resource for everything else. So, Lisa, why don't you kick it off with that, because, talk a little bit about the TEE module, and how you've worked it into GPUs and why that's important.
Thanks, Michael. So Secret Network is a layer 1 blockchain, and we're now working on creating confidential AI infrastructure. There are different technologies that can do on-chain encryption. We're doing TEEs, which is Trusted Execution Environment, sort of a hardware shortcut. But essentially, we're building that foundational layer that Michael was talking about so that everyone else can build AI that is confidential and secure. I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and Tony, yes, CETI and just real quickly, why is it important that we get compute right?
Well, my background's in finance, and I went into crypto, and then I saw the opportunity in AI. And my business partner used to be the CEO of Bitcoin.com, and we literally said, seriously, all these computes, okay, if it's controlled by a handful of people, not saying anything, by the way, but it's people are just going to take advantage of it, and people won't have access. And the thing we decided was, we're going to invest into getting the hardware and then giving it access to people that's in the decentralization, in crypto or AI, to build their projects on top of it. Because that is the foundation. Where we are today in crypto is because of decentralization, and then the hybrid of the decentralization with the centralization. And this is where we see the opportunity. You need the opportunity for the market to decide how to grow without a central organization saying, you can't do this, you can't do that. You just have to let it be, and then see where the dice would roll.
And what's the Aethir's take on this? What's the relevance for you guys? Mic on?
Hello. Yeah, maybe I did. Yeah, Mark here, co-founder at Aethir. At Aethir, we build distributed GPU infrastructure for gaming and AI companies. You can think of us like an AWS or a Google Cloud, except we focus exclusively on GPUs, and we don't actually own any of the GPUs in our cloud. Essentially, we aggregate enterprise-grade compute from providers all over the world, and then we resurface it and allow builders in the AI space, in the gaming space, to access that compute and build really interesting and cool things. I think decentralization from a compute layer is incredibly necessary when you remember, or when you understand the role of GPUs in the broader AI space, right? GPUs are essentially the engine powering AI, right? Whether it's from a training perspective, taking ChatGPT 4 to ChatGPT 5, or whether it's from an application perspective, powering your responses you get from ChatGPT. A couple of weeks ago, Elon Musk tweeted about how he's raising $25 billion to build a data center. And in that data center, he wants to put 1 million GPUs, right? NVIDIA doesn't just hear that and then go and produce an extra 1 million GPUs, right? They're already essentially at max capacity, and they've roadmapped out their manufacturing requirements and needs for the next like 5-10 years, right? So as soon as someone like that comes out and says, okay, I need 1 million GPUs, there's a lot less for the rest of us, right? And the way that AI works, it derives a huge amount of value from centralization, right? The more capital you have, the more resources you own, effectively the faster you can run the race, the higher the likelihood you are to be the one that has the most performant model at the right time. So that means that these critical resources, GPUs, are very often highly scarce to those of us that are looking to build outside of just the top 5 companies in the world. And I think that's why, certainly from a GPU perspective, decentralization is important, right? How can we get resources to the builders that maybe we would like to be building AI, not just the builders that happen to have the deepest pockets?
I agree with what you just said. The thing is, okay, getting the GPUs is hard, okay? The only reason we got them was not because we asked nicely, it's because we knew somebody, yeah? The old school way, picking up the phone and saying, actually, can you help us out? And that's the part, as you said, if the concentration of the GPUs would go there, the amount of power that Elon would have would be closer to a medium-sized nation, okay? Not a small town, but that is a huge amount of power. And the part is, the amount of electricity is the next phase. We're talking about GPUs, but the electricity is another part. It's like, we're building the infrastructure, the AI is the cars that run on top of it. It's my visual, how I visualize.
So Lisa, what Tony and Mark are talking about to a large degree here is essentially what you might call the democratization of compute, right? That everybody has a chance to run this. But I mean, that would be great, I suppose, if like, similar to our smartphones, we could all just take these GPUs and put a cluster in our backyard and have our own very own completely enclosed thing, right? But that's not what's going to work, and that's not what these guys are setting their operations up either. So how does the role of your technology and others play to enable me to kind of think of this as my own AI, even though that compute really is actually sitting in a data center somewhere else?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. So we're talking about the fight, right? The fight to decentralize AI. And Elon Musk buying 1 million GPUs is, how decentralized do we think that is? Anybody? Anyone? I don't think that's very decentralized. So that's why it's a fight, because we have some very powerful people trying to gather power in one place and control it. And in order to make it, as Michael said, everybody have their own little piece that they can control. We all should be controlling our own data. We all should be controlling our own agents, our own AI agents in the world. And in order to do that, you need, first of all, decentralization. So what these guys are talking about and what Deus is doing is decentralization of AI. But now you've got a problem, because we're decentralizing using blockchain. What is the guiding principle of blockchain? Started out, transparency. Okay, if we're talking about a transparent and decentralized AI, now we've got a huge problem with security, because now I'm exposing my entire life to my agent, and my agent is exposing my entire life to the blockchain, to anyone who can read it. So that is why we have this solution with TEEs that allows you to put your data onto the blockchain, but you encrypt it. You encrypt it before you put it on there. Now it is publicly available, but nobody can read it. And the only person who can decrypt it is someone with the permission, the viewing key. And you can share that viewing key with anyone, your friend, your doctor, your therapist, anyone you want to. You can share pieces of that information, pieces of that vast store of knowledge about you and your inner mind. But you don't just put it out there on the blockchain for everybody to see. So it's an essential piece of decentralization, is this ability to control the data that goes in and out.
It's kind of ironic, actually. I think we do, decentralization, to me, in some respects, has this centralizing piece to it, but it centralizes right at the user, right? So the privacy piece is that element of it. There's no transparency at all between, me and my data and you, but it's the layer that's sort of coordinating that, the deep in network and everything else that requires that transparency. So it's the trade-off between the two. It's that kind of almost like an airlock between them that I think is important. Guys, I want to talk a little bit about the economics of all of this, right? So you've got Sam Altman talking he needs another 1 million GPUs and so forth. And what that creates is this impression of the only way to win the race is by gathering everything in one place and running it. How can we create, through DeepIn, something that is going to be able to compete with whatever massive cluster OpenAI is running? I mean, how do we get to the point where is it competitive right now, I suppose, to both of you? Tony?
Yes, simply yes. The thing is, if we didn't believe that, then we should just pack up now and sod off, yeah? Let's not put it around. So you said about economics. You know my theory on this, okay? I know this is getting recorded and I'll get stick about it, but my whole theory is about threesome, okay? Everything that you want to be successful is threesome. Physical, digital AI, you have to embrace it. You have to own it. You have to understand it from a personal point of view, but also from a business point of view. You need to make sure that how to talk to it and secure it. The thing is, we live in a world today where we don't think about our data. We share information on social media. We do everything because that's the norm. And that's the problem, is that we forget that information is not power, but the people that can use that information and apply it, that's power. And that is the problem we have. So you talk about economics, and I think about we are building an ability for entrepreneurs and like-minded people to grow their businesses, to create the infrastructure so businesses can grow, especially crypto and AI, when normal like AWS and stuff like that will stop them or give them restrictions. The thing is, if you look at ChatGPT, you can ask it a lot of questions, but it always says, I can't answer that. I can't do this. It's limited by the information. So the part is, we have to keep on fighting about it, because if not, then we should just give up, yeah? And just go, it was a good one. And the thing is, if you look at history, empires are always the same. The empires have powers, and it's the people that rise up that bring the empire to change and move forward.
So I agree with that in the sense that, like, ultimately, economic directionality here should I hope move toward this world where, because the greater outcome, the greater innovation is going to come when we enable and empower people at the edges to control those three elements you talked about. But I'm just going to push back, not against you, but just to throw it to you, Mark, because at the moment we still see this instinct towards centralization all the time, right? It's almost like the AI version of that line that nobody ever got fired hiring IBM, right? No one ever got fired using AWS might be the way to frame it these days. And so even though, like, that's a very expensive contract proposition for a lot of these enterprises and AI systems to use, they're still defaulting to that, even though there are decentralized alternatives which are cheaper and faster and more privacy preserving. What needs to happen for there to be a mindset? And if it's not economics, what is it?
I mean, if you think purely through the lens of what is the most high-performant way that I can produce high-performant AI, then the answer, in almost all cases is going to be through a centralized approach, right? Because you need to have a huge amount of compute. That compute needs to be adjacent to other compute, right? You then need to have access to a huge amount of data, right? And data is expensive, right? Pretty much all of the performant frontier models that we see today have been trained on effectively all of the publicly available data on the internet, right? So now we're starting to think, okay, where does that high quality non-public data live, right? And do I need to pay to access it? Do I need to be OpenAI and do a deal with Reddit, right? Or am I Tesla and I have a whole bunch of car data generated by cars, and that's a unique data link, or Google with YouTube, right? So the next models accessing fresh data will that's very expensive, right? Also, there's a race from a performance perspective, but there's a race from a speed perspective as well, right? The time it takes you to get to that next performant model is also kind of relevant, right? So I think in terms of how the race looks today with current technology, there's not very much, I think, that will ever convince one of those companies to investigate doing something in a different way. Like, the opportunity cost is too high. However, there are, I think, some things coming down the line quite soon that may change things a little bit, right? So for example, when you look at AI through the lens of applications as opposed to just training models, right? That is something that doesn't require centralized compute, right? It's something that can be pushed onto a distributed network, right? It's where latency matters. So whether you have ChatGPT running on a data center in Japan as opposed to on the East Coast of the US, you're going to have a better service if it's run there, right? And the great thing that we know about distributed compute networks is that they're very good at handling latency-sensitive concerns, right? So I think certainly from the application level, we have a really interesting role to play in the future. If you look at some of the bottlenecks, and Tony mentioned this before, power is a bottleneck we see very, very soon. There are many estimates saying that by 2030, we will have capped the amount of power that we can draw out of the Earth's power grid, right, for data centers, right? So then we're thinking, okay, what are the new opportunities? Do we invest in more nuclear energy? Do we set up different sorts of like solar plants?
And you think that becomes a decentralizing force, for example, if there's nuclear or solar or renewable that's actually location specific?
Yeah, I think decentralization of the power grid is an option. But also plugging into equipment that's already connected to the power grid that isn't used for those services. So accessing latent compute from your phone or from your gaming PC, right? That is a form of teraflop that isn't captured in this data center assessment, right? Are we very good at using it for these sorts of workloads today? No, but there are definitely a number of very pointy areas of research that are kind of exploring this, and teams that are actually running decentralized training protocols today, and that is, that's an option.
So there's a couple of things that both Tony and Mark said, Lisa, that I think, to me, help to frame the paradigm of how the true, real benefits of AI from an economic and from a kind of a humanity and innovation perspective roll out, right? And it comes down to something that Mark was talking about, the data being right now, the large LLMs, this idea that you've got OpenAI and Anthropic and Llama and Gemini all kind of racing to reach AGI is this very centralizing idea, but they're all trained on publicly available data, right? Those foundational models, this base layer is just, they've gotten as far as they can with it, because the real opportunities lie when you go up the stack to the application layer, as Mark was talking about, and there you run into the problem of data that nobody wants to give up because it needs to be privacy preserved. So I think that this, to me, has always seemed like the opportunity, and why I think at Deus we see a great opportunity to work with these guys building sort of agentic networks and frameworks for personalized AI agents or customized agent that works for you. But again, you're going to have to be able to convince the CEO of whatever company that their data is safe and that the model can be verified. So how are you playing that game? How are you going to get enterprises to wake up and see, in fact, you could really unlock some of the great power of AI if you apply it to your supply chain problems or your business efficiency problems or how to find a cure for cancer or whatever it is, if you can trust the data and use this approach. So what's the message to them?
Yeah, we really reached the limit. You put it perfectly. We've reached the limit on what we can do with publicly available data because we're not willing to give up that really specialized data. I mean, just if you want to do medical testing, you have to buy your data, and it's actually very rare, very difficult to get enough data because of the problems of sharing medical data. But if you suddenly have data that is purely private, totally encrypted, and available in a safe way, that opens up, just like you said, you can now specialize. You can create agents that can solve particular diseases, that can have all of the data from all of the patients who have suffered from these diseases, and this has been collected. Because it's protected, it's no longer public data. So the applications are huge. And I think you alluded a little bit to the fact that this is a world-changing technology. We're not going to see the world change slowly over the next decade. We're going to see an acceleration of change because these AI, the power of AI is so great that it can really start to solve these problems that we've been working on for decades. Cancer, been working on it for decades, and we cannot solve it because it's a multivariate problem. Climate change is a multivariate problem. Our human brains have a hard time containing all of those variables, but AI can do it. But only if that data is available. And the only way that data will become available is if we actually protect it in a way that it can be used to train the models.
Tony, I'm going to ask you to take us home because you said something to me out there I thought was quite profound, and that was that like human creativity itself depends upon variability, fragmentation, and this kind of like concentration of economic power and data and control is actually driving everything towards one monolithic AI, which means we're throwing away creativity. Expand on that a little bit, and how do we get the world to wake up and participate in the models that Mark and yourself and Lisa are bringing to the table?
The beauty of humanity is its imperfection, okay? And I truly believe in that. The other part is, okay, do you remember when you were in school and people said you had to get a degree to be successful? Yeah? It's the same thing. And I do believe this is the two sides. Okay, people that took a degree, they became successful in their field because they're specialized, okay? But if you look at the most successful people, they do not have a degree because they're street smarts. And this is where we are at the moment. The AI that you just talked about is perfect for that kind of medical kind of thinking. But the part that you need common sense for, or you need the thinking outside the box, that is where AI can be so appropriate. Because it can help you as an entrepreneur or as somebody how to get there. You ask AI, is water good for you? Okay? Is water good for humans? And it will say yes. And I say, if I put your head in the water, is it good for you? Oh no. But the thing is, okay, because it's been programmed to say water is good for you, water is good for you. But the thing is, it doesn't think of, okay, I'll shove your head in water. Is it now good for you? Don't be smart as. That's the part where we need the two.
For the record, water is actually good for you guys, to be clear. But anyway.
It is if you put in whiskey. I agree, okay? But that is where we are, so.
It's absolutely, it nails it, I think. But any last word, Mark?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the great things about privatization and data in the blockchain space is this idea that we know what models are trained on. Right now, data gets thrown into a big fat blob, right? And then that data is used to train models, and we don't really know specifically what data that model was trained on, right? We know that it was trained on a lot of data, but we don't know specifically what, right? Was there data in that we would maybe like to avoid training the model on, for example? This kind of combination of what's great about the blockchain with data and privacy is a really great way to look at what models we want in the future and potentially how to make them a little bit better, a little bit more specialized, maybe a little bit more aligned with the type of models we'd like to see.
I love that. Exclusion is just as important as inclusion, right? Is a distinguishing factor. Okay, wonderful panel. We could have been kept on going for hours here, but thank you. Please, a round of applause for these guys.